thought it was probably just one person he paid $8 million to. Turned out it was four females he had an affair with. 2 million each for all four females. Your case is gonna blow up in your face, man. I'm just letting you know that now.
Oh yeah, 100%. Rich man's doing what rich man does, paying him off to keep him silent. But if that's four, there's probably more. That's all I got to
It,
say.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's probably more.
Like you think about it, like this man and his company. These are men and women who travel constantly, all year round, overseas, and throughout all the United States. Right?
Hmm.
Some of them are bound, which I find it's very unfortunate, but I just have to put it to the fact that not all people are good people. Um, and that is unfortunate. A lot of these people that we like to believe are good people, which WWE has had its fair share of wrestlers who've gotten in trouble when it comes to this. And they usually cut them loose immediately. Um, Exhibit A, Enzo Amore is one example of a wrestler they just cut loose. So, with the amount that they travel, they're never really in the same place longer than a week. Um, it's an easy alibi to get away with. You're probably gonna be leaving that state the 2 days after the incident happened. So you think it's never gonna come to bite you in the bud. But some of these women, and I'm proud of these women for stepping up and speaking up for themselves, they're not
Hmm.
gonna let you slide. No matter how rich or famous you are, how much people love your character and everything you do. So, in short, lesson for all the men out there: get consent and stop being assholes. Thank you.
Oh no, like I definitely agree. I don't know what's wrong with Vince McMahon. Like, I understand you're rich and everything, well, like almost a billionaire at that fact, but just because you had an affair with and think, I don't know, your wife is not doing this, your wife is not doing that, um bruh, it's all this stuff is gonna come back to bite you anyway. That's what people think. Like, oh, I'm gonna make them hush, so they're not gonna hear from me for a long time till I'm dead. Then they're probably gonna come up with the allegation. But bruh, you realize that when it comes to stuff like this, especially if you paying females to shut the fuck up, they're still gonna say shit about it. And what bothers me on top of that too, like I said this before, if you're like I said the whole thing with the R. Kelly case, if it happened that time, if it happened at that time, say it at that specific time. Don't wait 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years to later. If it happens at that time and you feel like it's very
Now,
necessary to say it to the people,
my,
to the public,
now
say it
here's
at that time.
my guy. Here's the I 100% get that, but like let me explain to you the main problem with your argument there, right? Like, yes, I would say it's definitely upsetting. Especially like if we're looking at this from a fan's perspective, right? It's definitely upsetting to see a person that you probably followed and watched for 10 years get these allegations and things said about them, and it's hard for you to believe because it happened a long time ago. This is someone you look up to that you always believed is a good person, right? It's difficult, but when it comes to trauma and trauma response, as well as a lot of people are like if illegal activity was happening and you yourself know you also did something illegal, you're least likely to come forward to it because you'll most likely just be judged on the illegal thing that you did instead of the other way around. Now, a lot of people they wait till these men become famous and stuff like that. A lot of the time these men are already famous, so it's gonna look down people are gonna look down on them no matter what. Men and women. Like when they have money, money talks. Things get swept under the rug. People don't buy a story. There have been people who spoken up at that time, and they don't get believed just because of the connection that person has. Um, I always recommend sooner rather than later because, under my again, for me personally, and how I process trauma, I'd rather be able to prevent it from happening to someone else
Mm-hmm.
after it's happened to me, because that's just how I view it. But I'm not like every other woman out there in the world or every other man out there in the world who feels comfortable enough to put themselves in front of everyone, in front of the entire world. Because remember, like, the victims are usually just as exposed as the person who's being accused. They're not really getting money for this. It's mainly hate. They're mainly getting hate when they speak up about things like this. Whether it's just the affair, an affair baby, or when it's violent sexual crimes. They're putting themselves for the public to see, to receive all the hate for something that they had no control over 20, 30 years ago. If they were a minor, minors, especially minors, they don't want to talk about that. They're kids. They want to be kids. They want to forget about it, move on, live the rest of their teenage lives. Most of them don't even want to tell their parents about things a grown person has done to them. And like, I feel like we had a discussion not long ago, like talking about how, like, in the black community particularly, especially when it comes to R. Kelly, we we seem to live in an environment where we always protect the predators. Everyone has that uncle or that auntie that you're supposed to just dress a little bit more conservatively around. We always seem to protect the predators because we don't want to quote unquote ruin their lives. And that's been ingrained in our minds since childhood, that, oh, they may harm a child, but we're going to do our best to prevent that so that their lives aren't ruined. But at the end of the day, they either have or will harm a child, or have or will harm another human being, but we choose to protect them because blood is thicker than water, or because we just told, well, we shouldn't say anything because we're going to ruin that person's lives. And then you live 30, 40 years later, and you've grown, you've gone to therapy, you've got help, and you start to realize how toxic those ideals are, and you're not going to let that control you anymore. So you decide on your own, you're going to speak out about it. That's opening the doors to a lot of hate, to a lot of criticism, and you still decide to speak about that. And I find that very brave, in my opinion. I find that very brave, that you're willing to speak on something that happened so long ago, knowing that you're going to get opinions like yours yourself, which I'm not invalidating your opinion whatsoever. I completely understand the outrage. As someone who is also, like, because of the society we grew up in, how we're expected to perceive these things, have also felt that outrage. I don't invalidate that whatsoever. I completely understand the anger of wanting to know these things sooner and when they happen, so that they feel more legit. So that you can toss it out of your mind that it's not about money, it's not about the fame, it's not about anything else. I completely understand that. I don't invalidate that whatsoever. But at the same time, as a woman, I also understand the other perspective. And I understand that other people also don't understand those perspectives. Which is why I never judge about how late or how early someone decides to speak on a situation, because of how many women have experienced that and how many men have experienced that. And there's so many men, like, especially on the men's side, who don't talk about these things. I wish they did. Like, they will take it to their deathbeds and never say anything. We'll go idolizing a person, not knowing they've committed this crimes to this man, because especially with men, they're told that they scored if they slept with an older woman when they were young. They're told that they should be happy about it. They were so lucky that this grown adult woman is wanting to sleep with this 16, 15-year-old. They were preyed upon. They were a kid. They're teenagers. A 16-year-old girl is no different from a 16-year-old boy. They were victimized. Unfortunately, I take that responsibility, like, for our generation, like me and you still being, like, pretty decently young, to try to change that when it comes to our children, saying no matter what happens, this is wrong. You are able to talk to me about it no matter what, to where they don't have to feel like they have to wait 30 years before they can speak on it. That they feel comfortable enough to tell us, to tell the cops, to tell police, to investigators, so that something is done about it. That they don't feel like they will suddenly become the ones who are on trial and not the person who did something wrong. Because at the end of the day, cases like that, most of the time the victim is the one on trial and not the person who actually committed the crime. Just because of how we're raised to view it. and how ingrained that is in our minds as a community. And that's just something that needs to change. I don't expect it to change overnight. I still expect to hear opinions like this all the time. That's just unfortunately that's right now something that comes with the territory. But talking about it and educating people about it will lead to the steps of change to where we will stop seeing cases like that. Things get nipped in the bud when they happen, and they're dealt with properly and not just by a slap on the wrist. That's what I honestly hope comes out of most of these women speaking for late, is that people realize the benefits of coming out early about it.
See, so it's bad for people to come out early about it. Then you know.
There is a downside to both. So the problem with coming out late, is that sometimes there's insufficient evidence, right? Other
Mhm.
times there's not. Like whether there's video stuff like that, coming out with something late for the victim, you're automatically looked at someone who's money hungry if there's someone who's wealthy, or trying to ruin a family because that person got married, or they grew up, they're not the same person anymore. You're attacking someone for something they did in their past, right?
Mhm.
Um, don't they deserve to be forgiven? At the end of the day, it's not our job to forgive that person for their crime. It's the person who spoke up about it to choose whether or not they want to forgive. And not everyone is obligated to forgive anyone for what they've done to them in their past. When it comes out to coming out earlier, especially if that person is already a person of status,
Mhm.
um, everything in your life is going to get scrutinized. Were you guys doing drugs? What were you wearing? Were you drinking too much? Aren't you a minor? What were you doing at a bar in the first place? Did you tell him what your actual age was? Like, it becomes more of you're the one being investigated. Because if it happened just then, you're saying, like, unfortunately, that happens so often, and I wish it didn't, where so many boys and girls who speak out, especially when they're young, when they're teenagers, are automatically judged for doing something dumb and young because they're young. So they're automatically judged for doing something that's immature as immature people, even though they're the ones that were the victims of the situation. If for example, if a teenage girl snuck into a nightclub, right? Because some clubs forget to ID, and she's partying with her friends, and she's sexually assaulted by a grown man.
Okay.
The first thing the cops are going to ask is, well, what were you doing at a 21 and up nightclub at 17 years old? Were you drinking? Were you under the influence of drugs? Were you and your friends taking drugs? Well, how would I know whether or not you were taking drugs? You were at a nightclub that you weren't supposed to be at in the first place, so how do I know you weren't taking drugs? Are you sure he really said that? Did he really do that? Maybe he was just being nice. Maybe he was just playing nice. He didn't really mean that, don't you think? Maybe he just thought you were a grown woman. You're dressing out provocatively, aren't you? And it turns into you seduced him and not he harmed me. And that's without status. That's just average, normal looking guy. When you're young, you're gonna ruin his life. When you're old, he's already lived the life you want his money. So which one is it? Do I feel worse about ruining a young man's career or a young woman's career? Like would I feel more guilty coming out early and knowing that someone's gonna blame me for ruining this young person's career, young adult's career, versus I come out about it 30 years later, they've had their career, and I'm just looked at oh, I'm a gold digger, I want their money. I want to ruin their family. I'm the jealous ex. That's the downside of both. And it's unfortunate that happens. There's so much that needs to go into doing that when it comes to police reform, with how we handle victims in the situation, with how we investigate sexual heinous crimes. There's so many things that needs to go into changing that just haven't started happening yet, and it's heartbreaking that there's people still going through that today, and it seems like we're going backwards on it when it comes to things like that. Um, and it's an unfortunate situation. I wish it never happened in the first place, because yeah, you can easily say, well, if the first 2, 3 minor girls that R. Kelly slept with would have came out about it earlier, then it wouldn't have happened to the other ones. That's not true. R. Kelly was a man with money. He was a man with deep roots into the black community and deep roots in the black church of people who loved him. Whether or not how provocative his shows were, he made songs that spoke to people. If anything, those little girls would be looked at as, oh, they're just fangirls. Like, why would they be mad about getting to sleep with him? Any girl would be lucky to sleep with R. Kelly, and that's how honestly it was portrayed when people in the media were talking about it. Dude married a minor, and
that was weird.
people turned a blind eye because he was R. Kelly. He had a name for himself. He was a young, promising man in the music industry. Vince McMahon is Vince McMahon. He's the CEO of WWE, this multi-million-dollar corporation based on entertainment that, when you look at it, is showing off men and women's bodies to the public and the brutality they go through in the ring. Some people look at it as fighting. Some people view it as sexual because, I don't know. I really don't understand that part, but some people do. And they love it. And he makes money off of it. People love him for the career he's created for these men and women with beautiful physiques to show off to the world the skills that they can perform. And they love him for it. Came out sooner when he was young and up and coming, and WWE was WWF and all that other stuff. People would have been like, oh, you're trying to ruin WWE. You're trying to take away our entertainment. Or you're trying to take away Vince McMahon, who's created such the successful business for himself. You just want his money. You just want child support. You just want to have his babies. You're mad he didn't pick you. You mad he chose his wife over you. Like, people will always find a way to spin it the way they want it. And unfortunately, it seems so believable. People have to admit it. It seems so believable. And, everything with Me Too happened, and everything that's recently happened with, like, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp just sent us back, like, 15, 20 steps, because she portrayed herself as a woman of the Me Too movement, as a domestic violence survivor, as someone who's went through abuse, who's been assaulted. That's how she portrayed herself. And the people of the movement overall seem to accept her, except for the men who were like, nah, I'm going to support Johnny Depp, right? Now, in a lot of women's eyes, they're like, oh, so you're going to support the abuser. And then there was a lot of people like, I'm not going to make an opinion about this yet because I love Pirates of the Caribbean, right? At the end of the day, we don't know these people. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they do in their pastime. We just know what the courts can offer us when an investigation is done. And she lied. She lied and perjured herself on the stand multiple times to ruin this man's career because she did not want him to leave her. Because she was a fucking narcissist. And now people have evidence, even if it's just this one incident, that if one woman can do it, all of them can. They believe that since this one woman can do it, all of it can, but some reason can't understand that the reason why every woman is afraid of all men, because it's not only one man that did it. It wasn't only one instance of a man that did it. And now they're wondering, well, why are you guys blaming all men for this? It wasn't all men that did it. It's not all men. Which, every time I hear not all men, pisses me off. It's happened enough to where women don't know who the good men are anymore. They don't know what men to trust anymore. It's on men now as the burden of proof. It is now your burden of proof to prove that you actually are a good man. And not just by saying you're a good man. Like, the bar is so low that we will love you if you just don't spike our drinks on the first goddamn date. That's how low the bar is. Like, it is heartbreaking and so sad to see that that's how we view it, but that's how we protect ourselves. And until something's actually done about it, and the government steps in, and something of progress is actually done about it, and we take these situations more seriously, it's always going to happen. There's always going to be women that speak 30 years too late. There's always going to be people who try to speak out early, and no matter what happens, most of the time, nothing happened. We have states where men can plead guilty to raping multiple women and get off with just probation. And it's ridiculous that judges have the power to just give them a slap on the wrist for things they even admit to doing, that they plead guilty of doing, and do it in front of their victims' faces. Because things like that happen, things like R. Kelly's and Vince McMahon's and any other artist out there being accused or who are actually guilty of doing these things, it will just continue to happen. There will be more Johnny Depps. There will be more Amber Heards. There will be more R. Kellys. There will be more Vince McMahons. There will be more Donald Trumps and Jeffrey Epsteins because nothing is ever done, especially when it involves the rich. Nothing is ever actually done.
Hmm. I understand you. Like now I know what you mean by like it's about them not saying it as soon as it happens. Because usually, in my opinion, I thought they didn't say it because like obviously like he hurt you like physically and emotionally and probably broke you down mentally. So it's like in my opinion, like why just not say it like then when it happened instead of just like now in this age when it could have been done. It could have, the guy could have been in jail, and so he could have been in jail like, been in jail from a long time ago instead of, now when he's like old age and barely has, and all his family is basically, older and everything like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my. I don't know. That's what I just always thought, but now that I hear your point about it, like it makes sense now.
Like, I completely, like, everyone always wish things, like, they would find out things sooner. Just, especially when it's things that are that bad. You always wish you would have known sooner because at the same time, like, people need to recognize that they also feel guilty. Like, you know how many people who, like, let's not even go to R. Kelly. Let's see another artist. Chris Brown. The situation with Chris Brown and Rihanna, right? How many
Hmm.
people felt internalized guilt for supporting them two for so long, knowing that they were committing acts of violence against each other. And then when more things came out about Chris Brown and other women, even years later, you're like, I supported and listened to this man's music. I'm part of the reason he has so much money right now and that he's able to keep doing what he does because I supported him. Because I listened to his music. Why didn't they tell me this all happened sooner? So I would have just cut him off. I would have stopped listening to his music. I would have stopped making sure he kept getting funding. Because we feel guilty. We feel guilty that we didn't know. But at the end of the day, it's not your fault that you listened to an artist's music that you liked. It is not your fault that you watched a celebrity on TV because you actually genuinely liked their acting, that you looked up to them. Because at the end of the day, that's the image they gave you to support. The one that they wanted you to like. That's the job is for them to make themselves likable to the public. That is their job. And they did it well. It is not your fault that you did exactly what they wanted you to do. That they wanted you to like them. It is not your fault whatsoever. There is no reason to feel guilty about that.
Hmm.
You can do something about it now. It may not make a change. It may barely make a dent in the situation. But it's up to you. Like, you can choose to either separate the music from the artist or pirate all their music if it still like has an emotional connection to you. It is up to you
Hmm.
what you do with that information. But at the end of the day, you as an individual are not responsible for the actions that someone else makes. For how they handle their emotions, how they react to certain things, and the actions that they take are never your responsibility. And that's just the end of it. So, like, and there's a lot of internalized guilt when it comes to situations like these. And I need people to understand that it's never your fault that you didn't know. Just as much as it's not the victim's fault that they didn't say anything.
Okay. Okay. I completely understand what you mean though. It's probably been like hard for like a lot of people to deal with in general.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're going with the back to the allegations and everything with Vince McMahon. I just that's just my that's all what I've thought for a very long time. I just didn't like when it comes to stuff like this, it's it's harder for females now to come out then. I'm gonna come out then than it is now about stuff. But honestly, I don't know what's gonna happen now with Vince McMahon. I don't know if he's gonna get fired from his own company and his daughter steps in permanently. Like I mean, I know she's permanent now, but as in like permanently with creative team and all that type of stuff. But we will just have to give y'all more updates on how the whole thing goes down still with all the allegations, and how much, if he's going to get jail time, how much jail time he will get, and if he gets life in prison, then I don't know how that's going to end up with, honestly.